Hello, this is the June version of Stronger, the LinkedIn newsletter, and I am Tatiana Kolovu. 5 crisis communication lessons from the intensive care unit. Last month, my family was wrapping up the spring semester, scheduling a vacation, and planning for our son's high school graduation. Little did we know that an unpredictable series of events would land us in the intensive care unit, the ICU, of the Indianapolis Riley Hospital for Children, as our 17-year-old son fell ill. My husband and I stood among daily huddles of up to 15 medical professionals trying to make sense of lab results and complicated terminology only taught in med school. 3 weeks later, we're finally home caring for our resilient teenager, and I cannot help but reflect upon the intense crisis communication scenarios we experienced. See, I teach communication, so I'm always attuned to how people relay information, approach tense situations, present new ideas, and carry themselves in a position of authority. Our incredible team of doctors, nurses, interns, residents, and students reminded me of what we all can emulate when we communicate in a time of crisis. Here are my top 5 crisis communication observations. Number 1, be inclusive. The communication I observed in the ICU was effective and would apply to the workplace. Several specialty teams were involved in our son's care. Now, during the morning huddle, when lab results and trends of his vital signs were shared, I observed the head ICU doctor address each team for their interpretation and diagnosis. He turned to the third-year student leading the huddle and asked guiding questions that led to the next step. He was inquisitive about numbers that related to 2 or 3 specialties, combining and summarizing what he heard. He included us, the parents, who best knew the patient and made us feel like we were part of the medical team. This was all done swiftly, and in the end, the decision and final direction was his. This process was inclusive, and the direction was hierarchical. The lead physician owned his position and responsibility while making everyone feel like they were part of the team. Number 2, simplify and scaffold. These medical professionals were outstanding in their ability to communicate a range of complex terminology. They offered analogies, visuals, they used both big picture and tight scope approaches in their communications. In a crisis situation, one must explain the complex, manage with the limited information available, and talk about knowns and unknowns. What I observed these master communicators do was to quickly gauge our level of understanding and then patiently bring us up to speed while detailing the complexity of the scenarios. Think about your own profession. If something went awry and you had to speak in a press conference, how would you simplify your wording? Or how would you communicate to a higher proficiency level of speaking to peers? Always adapt to your audience and speak accordingly. Number 3, be transparent. When there are so many unknowns, the level of anxiety for everyone involved is high. Many of the leading physicians in charge followed the crisis communication playbook. I particularly remember a specialty physician who followed our son's treatment. She communicated early and often with us. She was present for all the major hallway meetings and addressed all constituents present. Most importantly, she was transparent, and she admitted when she didn't know, when tests were inconclusive, or when information was incomplete. In the tense setting of a crisis, it takes a level-headed leader to demonstrate this level of visibility and transparency. What can you do if a crisis arises and you're required to step up and be the point person on communication? Transparency goes far to help establish trust. Number 4, show empathy. Granted, we were in a children's hospital, but the level of empathy and understanding we experienced was beyond measure. From attentive nonverbals while we tried to grapple with the intensity of the situation, to verbal affirmations that put us at ease, simple phrases such as, "I'm sure this is too much right now," and "I've never dealt with something like this before, but I can feel you're stressed," or You have every right to feel this way. This is horrible. All this did so much to create a meaningful connection for us. I don't think there's a med school playbook that includes any of this terminology. However, this was a pediatric hospital, and I learned that staff there are of a very special breed. Amid so much stress and anxiety in this crisis, I truly benefited from such patient, caring, and empathetic communication. A crisis is hard to endure, and we all respond differently. When you're facing it and have some responsibility in communicating outwards, think of everyone involved and show that what Brene Brown says, you feel with them sensation. Number 5, do, monitor, diagnose, and repeat. A crisis can seem debilitating, but the best source of action is to act on something. University of Toronto Rotman School of Management professor Marlies Christensen examined how 19 different emergency teams navigated the same unexpected situation in a medical simulation scenario. With my son's illness, we observed the benchmark behavior firsthand. Our medical teams took action, do, then examined if the action had an effect, monitor, and depending on that, came upon with a diagnosis which circled back to a new action, diagnose and repeat. The teams in Dr. Christensen's experiment not faring well with those that were paralyzed by analysis or those who acted and monitored but didn't diagnose in order to create a new action path. Not all crisis situations require this cyclical pattern of action, but when they do, and you have more information to communicate and repeated puzzles to solve, follow Dr. Christensen's formula of do, monitor, diagnose, and keep repeating. I would never wish my experience upon any of the parents reading this newsletter, but it did shine a light on the vital importance of stellar communication in a critical situation. How do you plan to apply any of the 5 lessons to your work? Please share those with me and also share this newsletter with anyone who might benefit. My heartfelt thank you to all the skilled medical staff and to the many others not listed in our hospital dismissal papers, so I didn't have their names, but who stood by our side. Thank you.